I still remember that day as if it were yesterday, the day I walked into my son's wedding, my heart swelling with pride, and my anticipation running higher than ever. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, carefully selecting every detail, from my hair to my accessories, to complement the $50,000 designer dress I had chosen for the occasion. It was not just a dress. It was a statement of elegance, of status, of the love and support I had for my son on one of the most important days of his life. I wanted to shine, not overshadow anyone, just to feel confident, poised, and radiant as I celebrated this once-in-a-lifetime event with my family. The venue itself was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers reflected the soft light over perfectly set tables, each adorned with delicate floral arrangements. The scent of fresh roses mixed with the subtle aroma of gourmet dishes filled the grand hall. Guests were arriving in their finest attire, laughter and conversations bouncing off the ornate walls. I felt a mixture of excitement and nerves as I prepared to greet everyone. Deep down, I had envisioned this day to be perfect, flawless, filled with happy memories that we would cherish forever. As I took my first few steps into the room, I could hear whispers of admiration. Friends and family complimented my dress, my styling, even my posture. I smiled graciously, soaking in the moment, silently reminding myself how special this day was. The wedding was in full swing, everyone celebrating the union of my son and his new bride, Vanessa. I genuinely wanted to share in the joy, to be part of the warmth and laughter that surrounded us. And then it happened. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, who I had hoped to build a warm, cordial relationship with, accidentally or perhaps carelessly spilled wine across the front of my dress. In an instant, my world shifted. The deep, rich burgundy liquid spread quickly across the delicate fabric, leaving a mark that felt like more than just a stain. It was a public humiliation. Right in front of all our guests, my heart raced, and a wave of shock and disbelief washed over me. How could this happen on such a significant day? The dress, the one I had chosen with love and anticipation, was ruined in mere seconds. I froze for a moment, uncertain how to react, as all eyes turned toward the commotion. I wanted to remain composed, to handle the situation gracefully. But inside, a storm of emotions turned anger, embarrassment, frustration. The energy in the room shifted. The joyful celebration suddenly felt tense, and I knew I had a decision to make that could define not just the rest of this day, but my relationship with my family moving forward. If you have ever experienced a moment when everything you plan seems to unravel before your eyes, you will understand that mixture of panic and disbelief. Stay with me as I share what happened next, how I handled the situation, the unexpected reactions from my family, and what I learned about patience, dignity, and forgiveness in the most surprising way. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories that will shock, inspire, and maybe even teach you a thing or two about navigating life's unexpected moments. As a retired forensic accountant, I had spent decades scrutinizing numbers, unraveling complicated frauds, and analyzing human behavior behind transactions that seemed innocent at first glance were hiding a deeper story. That training had taught me one vital lesson. In moments of chaos, the key was never to react impulsively, no matter how personal the affront might feel, because clarity always came from strategy, observation, and measured responses. As I stood there, my $50,000 dress ruined, and the room buzzing with whispers, stares, and the faint gasps of relatives and strangers alike, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I was no stranger to high-pressure situations. And this was a challenge that required composure rather than confrontation. I scanned the room quickly, noting the subtle shifts in body language around me. Some guests pretended not to notice, their polite smiles masking curiosity. Others leaned in just enough to catch the drama unfolding, eager to witness the tension between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Vanessa stood frozen, a mixture of shock and guilt spreading across her face. The wine-stained dress a silent testament to the chaos she had unintentionally or perhaps carelessly caused. I could have shouted, stormed out, or demanded apologies in that very moment. But something within me reminded me of the years I had spent dissecting financial misdeeds, analyzing motives, and understanding that reactions fueled the narrative of the unprepared. Instead, I allowed my mind to work as it always had. I assessed the damage not only to my dress, but to the energy in the room, the perception of everyone present, and the potential fallout for family dynamics. My training had taught me to consider both the immediate impact and the ripple effects, to predict how people would respond, and to craft an approach that preserved dignity while achieving a desired outcome. I could feel the adrenaline in my veins, but I converted it into sharp focus, a kind of calm readiness that masked the storm of emotions inside me. I moved deliberately, making sure that my posture, my gaze, and even the slight tilt of my head conveyed control rather than panic. Every subtle cue mattered. Every gesture was part of the message I was sending, not with words, but with presence. Vanessa's eyes met mine, and in that brief moment, I realized she was not prepared for the response I was about to give. She expected tears, or outrage, or perhaps a dramatic exit that would escalate the humiliation into something theatrical. But what I offered instead was the quiet authority of someone who understood consequences. Someone who had spent a lifetime turning potential crises into opportunities for strategic resolution. I approached her slowly, ensuring my movements were measured, my tone controlled, and my words precise. I could sense that the room collectively held its breath, waiting for me to act, for the scene to erupt into familial drama. Yet, my approach was neither cold nor distant. It was intentional, a reflection of the years I had spent balancing empathy with sharp analytical thinking. I began by addressing the immediate situation with clarity and precision. I acknowledged the accident, making it clear that while the dress was valuable, the real concern lay in the tension that now threatened to overshadow what should have been a joyous celebration. I chose my words carefully, highlighting that mistakes happen, that intentions mattered, and that this was an opportunity to demonstrate grace rather than escalate conflict. As I spoke, I noticed a subtle shift in Vanessa's demeanor. The initial panic softened. Her shoulders relaxed just slightly, and her voice, though still trembling, began to respond in kind. By framing the incident as a challenge to be managed rather than a battle to be won, I transformed the narrative from one of humiliation into one of collaboration, or at least tentative understanding. The guests, too, began to recalibrate their attention. What had started as a spectacle of embarrassment slowly turned into a demonstration of control and poise. I could see whispers morph into nods of respect, subtle glances that said, "She is handling this with elegance." And even Vanessa's parents, who had looked mortified just moments earlier, seemed relieved that the situation was being diffused rather than amplified. By choosing strategy over emotion, I had not only protected my own dignity but also shaped the room's perception, creating a space where reconciliation and rationality could take precedence over chaos and resentment. Throughout the rest of the evening, I remained acutely aware of every interaction, every look, and every choice I made. I found ways to navigate the wedding proceedings with subtlety, maintaining social grace while also establishing boundaries that protected my sense of self. I spoke with Vanessa at opportune moments, offering gentle reassurances and encouraging her to participate in resolving the incident rather than dwell on embarrassment. I made sure that my husband and son were aware of my intentions, not as a form of control, but to ensure that the family remained aligned and supportive. preventing any further misunderstandings or tension from escalating. By the time the evening drew to a close, I realized something profound about the power of measured responses. What could have been remembered as a catastrophic humiliation had instead become a testament to composure, intelligence, and the subtle art of influence. The wine-stained dress, once a symbol of disaster, now represented resilience and strategic thinking under pressure. I had turned a moment of potential chaos into a lesson in patience, foresight, and self-discipline, demonstrating that even in personal crisis, a clear mind and steady approach could shape outcomes far more effectively than anger or impulsive reactions ever could. After the wedding incident, I found myself reflecting not only on the chaos that had unfolded, but also on the way my mind instinctively sought patterns, connections, and the underlying motivations that drove people's actions. My years as a forensic accountant had conditioned me to see beyond the surface, to look at what was hidden, what was omitted, and what circumstances could reveal about character and intent. It was this very mindset that led me to turn my attention to the Ashford family, a prominent and influential dynasty whose reputation gleamed in society columns, but whose finances had always hinted at complexities that defied casual observation. What began as curiosity quickly transformed into a rigorous inquiry, as I realized that my skills could uncover truths that were obscured beneath layers of legal and financial obfuscation. I started by examining publicly available records, annual reports, and tax filings, parsing through spreadsheets and financial statements that most would dismiss as routine. Yet, with a trained eye, patterns began to emerge, transactions that seemed innocuous at first glance but, when cross-referenced, suggested the existence of shell companies strategically placed to divert funds, obscure ownership, or funnel assets through opaque channels. Each discovery felt like turning a corner in a labyrinth, revealing more passageways and doors than I had anticipated. I traced the flow of money through intricate networks of accounts, noticing inconsistencies in revenue reporting, unexplained transfers, and asset valuations that appeared deliberately inflated or deflated to conceal the true scale of operations. The deeper I dug, the more I understood that what seemed like a venerable family business on the surface was, in fact, a complex web of financial engineering that required careful scrutiny to fully comprehend. I was drawn into the patterns of behavior embedded in the Ashford empire, analyzing not just numbers but also the decisions that had led to their current structure. I noted how certain subsidiaries had been repeatedly restructured, how trust accounts and offshore entities were layered to limit transparency, and how legal instruments were deployed to maintain the illusion of legitimacy. These discoveries were more than academic exercises. They were glimpses into a mindset that blended ambition with opportunism, strategy with a willingness to exploit the system to its limits. Every shell company I identified, every irregularity I traced, told a story about the priorities and ethics or lack thereof within this family's operations. And I realized that understanding these patterns was key not only to uncovering financial discrepancies, but also to anticipating potential risks, liabilities, or even criminal exposure. I extended my investigation to the relationships within the family, observing how decisions were influenced by power dynamics, loyalty, and personal ambition. Interviews with long-standing associates and former employees, conducted discreetly and with careful preparation, revealed anecdotes that corroborated what the numbers suggested, patterns of favoritism, coercion, and carefully managed appearances designed to maintain public confidence while concealing internal disputes and questionable practices. Each conversation added context to the financial trail I had already begun to map, offering insight into motivations, risk tolerance, and the ways in which authority was exercised behind closed doors. It became clear that the Ashfords were not careless actors. They were meticulous in their orchestration, balancing public image with private maneuvering in ways that required me to match their precision with analytical rigor. The investigative process demanded patience and a disciplined approach. I spent long nights cross-referencing data from multiple sources, reconstructing timelines of transactions, and building models that revealed the hidden architecture of their empire. What initially appeared as isolated incidents, unexplained wire transfers, unusually complex contract structures, or sudden reallocation of assets formed a coherent picture when examined holistically, revealing systemic issues that were not accidental but strategic. I realized that my forensic experience allowed me to perceive subtleties that would have eluded the untrained eye, such as the timing of audits, the sequencing of account closures, and the placement of executives in roles that minimized oversight while maximizing influence. These were patterns of behavior that spoke volumes about the Ashfords' approach to risk, governance, and control, and I meticulously document every observation with the intent of drawing an accurate and defensible conclusion. As my investigation deepened, I encountered obstacles that tested both my patience and judgment. Some records were intentionally obscured, others incomplete or cryptically labeled, and legal boundaries complicated the pursuit of full transparency. Yet, I approached each challenge with the same principles that had guided my career. Methodical verification, skepticism of surface explanations, and relentless pursuit of corroborating evidence. Each barrier became an opportunity to refine my strategy, to anticipate moves before they were made, and to construct a narrative that could withstand scrutiny. It was not merely an exercise in financial detection. It became a study of human behavior, strategic thinking, and the intricate balance between appearance and reality in the realm of wealth and influence. By the time I had traced the web of shell companies, irregular transfers, and potential legal vulnerabilities, I realized that the Ashford Empire, for all its apparent sophistication, was vulnerable in ways few outsiders could perceive. What began as curiosity had evolved into a comprehensive understanding of a complex network, illuminating patterns that connected financial anomalies to personal and organizational motives, revealing the interplay between power, secrecy, and ambition. My role had transformed from passive observer to someone capable of interpreting these signs, drawing insights that could guide future action, whether in accountability, mitigation of risk, or strategic engagement. The investigation, painstaking and exhaustive, reminded me that beneath the polished veneer of any family or organization lies a landscape shaped by decisions, intentions, and the sometimes hidden pursuit of advantage, and that with patience, diligence, and analytical clarity, the truth could always be uncovered. As my investigation into the Ashford family deepened, it became clear that my activities had not gone unnoticed, and soon an unexpected development presented itself. I received an offer of a consulting contract from their legal team, framed as a gesture of goodwill and professional collaboration. But the subtext was unmistakable. They intended to control, influence, and monitor my actions under the guise of a legitimate agreement. The contract promised access to company data, privileged meetings, and strategic discussions, all presented in polished language that emphasized mutual benefit, professional respect, and the sharing of insights. On the surface, it seemed like an opportunity to formally contribute to their business. Yet I understood immediately that its true purpose was to bind me, to limit my autonomy, and to impose subtle restrictions on my freedom to investigate further. The wording was carefully constructed, blending professionalism with implied obligations, and I recognized that accepting it at face value would be a trap, a mechanism to neutralize my scrutiny without overt confrontation. Despite the obvious attempt at manipulation, I saw the situation differently. My years of experience as a forensic accountant had taught me that in every challenge lies an opportunity, and in every attempt at control, there exists a way to turn the tables. I decided to approach the consulting contract strategically, treating it not as a limitation, but as a legal tool to gain access to resources, data, and conversations that would otherwise be off limits. By formally agreeing to the contract under clearly defined terms that I had thoroughly reviewed and adjusted with my own legal counsel, I was able to position myself within the family's inner circle without relinquishing independence or compromising my principles. I carefully negotiated clauses that protected my ability to act freely, to document observations, and to gather evidence, turning what had been designed as a constraint into an instrument of empowerment. In doing, I transformed their attempt at control into an unprecedented opportunity to deepen my understanding of the empire I had been studying for months. The days that followed the signing of the contract were both exhilarating and tense, as I navigated a world of boardroom meetings, strategy sessions, and casual interactions that carried hidden significance. Every discussion offered subtle insights into their decision-making processes, the structure of their subsidiaries, and the flow of capital across the organization. I observed the way executives presented financial reports, the selective emphasis on certain metrics, and the careful avoidance of topics that might expose vulnerabilities. Through the lens of the consulting role, I could examine internal communications, track discrepancies between official statements and operational reality, and gather first-hand evidence that would have been nearly impossible to obtain externally. It was a delicate balance, acting as a participant while maintaining analytical detachment, listening carefully for inconsistencies, and interpreting both verbal and non-verbal cues to map the patterns of influence, control, and decision-making that defined the Ashford Empire. At the same time, I maintained meticulous records, documenting every observation with precision, cross-referencing data against public filings and prior findings, and building a chronological account of decisions and transactions. What I witnessed in meetings often revealed contradictions between their carefully curated public image and the underlying dynamics within the family and the organization. I noted subtle power plays, strategic positioning of individuals in roles that limited scrutiny, and the occasional tension between ambition and compliance, all of which provided context for the irregularities I had previously uncovered in financial records. It became apparent that the consulting contract had not diminished my role as an investigator but rather amplified it, granting me a legitimate vantage point to see both the overt and covert mechanisms that sustained the empire's facade. The psychological aspect of the engagement was equally revealing. By accepting the contract while remaining consciously aware of its intended purpose, I gained insight into how the Ashfords sought to manipulate relationships and perceptions. Their approach was calculated, relying on charm, persuasion, and the implicit authority of wealth and status to create compliance. Yet it relied heavily on the assumption that their influence would go unchallenged. I deliberately maintained a posture of professionalism while subtly asserting my own independence, allowing me to observe how attempts at influence were executed and how the individuals involved responded when faced with subtle resistance or alternative interpretations. This provided a deeper understanding of the human factors that drove decision-making, the way loyalty could be leveraged, and the intricate between control and trust in high-stakes environments. Over the ensuing weeks, my access under the consulting agreement proved invaluable. I discovered previously hidden financial arrangements, noted patterns in asset transfers that suggested attempts at concealment, and documented interactions that illuminated the family's strategies for mitigating exposure and maintaining appearances. The contract served as both shield and key. It protected me legally while opening doors that had been firmly closed, allowing me to observe the Ashfords in contexts that were revealing, candid, and instructive. I remained vigilant, conscious that any misstep could undermine my position or reveal my true intentions. Yet I approached each situation methodically, relying on analytical rigor, patience, and the careful calibration of my interactions. Every meeting, every document reviewed, and every casual conversation became a puzzle piece, and through the lens of this dual-role consultant and investigator, I could construct a comprehensive and the empire that has picture of the addict carefully cultivated its complex realities while masking competent ladies behind their Dale and financial engineering. By the time my consulting engagement had matured into a routine of observation, analysis, and documentation, I recognized that I had effectively turned an instrument of control into a means of empowerment, transforming the Ashfords' strategy into a pathway for uncovering truth. What had initially been presented as a subtle attempt to constrain me became, through careful planning, negotiation, and the application of professional expertise, a mechanism to access evidence, understand motivations, and map the inner workings of a family and business empire that few outsiders could ever hope to penetrate. In that transformation, I discovered a critical lesson. With strategy, patience, and analytical clarity, it is possible to convert the tools of manipulation into instruments of discovery, turning even the most calculated attempt at control into an opportunity to illuminate what had long been concealed. As the weeks turned into months, my work under the consulting contract evolved from careful observation into a meticulous effort to piece together the complex web financial and legal maneuvers that the Ashford family had orchestrated for decades. And with each new document, conversation, and subtle disclosure, the picture grew clearer and more alarming. The patterns I had long suspected began to solidify into tangible evidence. Money flowing through shell companies in ways that could not be explained by legitimate business activities. Charitable foundations that existed more as vehicles for concealment than as instruments of philanthropy. And transactions that hinted at collusion and outright fraud, all arranged with a sophistication that would have impressed even the most seasoned financial analyst. I worked tirelessly to trace the origins of funds, following the money across borders, through complex ownership structures, and across multiple jurisdictions, often late into the night, driven by a sense of purpose and the knowledge that what I uncovered could have far-reaching consequences. I began compiling detailed reports, documenting each irregularity with precision, cross-referencing them with public filings, internal memos, and the casual disclosures I had witnessed in meetings. Every spreadsheet, every email, every ledger entry became a piece of a much larger puzzle, and the magnitude of what I was uncovering weighed heavily on me. It was not merely a matter of mismanagement or poor accounting. These were deliberate and systematic efforts to manipulate financial systems, divert resources, and obscure accountability. I realized that exposing this required not only careful documentation, but also strategic thinking, patience, and unwavering adherence to the law, because any misstep could compromise the entire effort or place me in legal jeopardy. My dual role as consultant and investigator allowed me to continue gathering information without raising suspicion, and I leveraged every opportunity to clarify inconsistencies, ask targeted questions, and verify the legitimacy of transactions, all while maintaining the appearance of a cooperative and engaged professional. As my dossier of evidence grew, I began to connect individual anomalies into a coherent narrative of criminal activity, identifying patterns that suggested money laundering on a scale that spanned continents, fraudulent charities designed to siphon donations into private accounts, and the orchestration of financial movements intended to shield assets from taxation, litigation, or scrutiny. The subtlety with which these operations were conducted was both impressive and alarming, a testament to the sophistication of the Ashford Empire. Yet it also provided the leverage I needed to ensure that the truth could not be ignored. I meticulously recorded each step, ensuring that every finding could be substantiated and corroborated, aware that when I eventually presented this evidence to authorities, it needed to withstand intense scrutiny and legal challenges. The process required both intellectual rigor and emotional discipline, as I navigated the tension between the knowledge of wrongdoing and the necessity of methodical, verifiable action. Eventually, I compiled a comprehensive report, integrating financial statements, transaction histories, internal communications, and the patterns of activity I had documented, presenting the case in a way that clearly illustrated the deliberate nature of the misconduct and the mechanisms by which it was carried out. I submitted this material to federal authorities, working closely with investigators to ensure that every claim was substantiated, and providing detailed explanations of complex financial arrangements in language that was both precise and accessible. The response was immediate and serious, as the authorities reckoned the magnitude of the allegations and the reliability of the evidence. Investigators launched a federal inquiry, scrutinizing accounts, conducting interviews, and following the money trail with a level of diligence that matched the complexity of the schemes I had uncovered. The impact of my findings was profound and far-reaching. Key figures within the Ashford family and their associates were arrested, facing charges ranging from fraud and embezzlement to money laundering and misrepresentation. And the investigation reverberated across industries and jurisdictions that previously operated under the assumption that wealth and influence provided insulation from accountability. I watched as courts and regulatory agencies dissected the evidence, uncovering additional layers of misconduct that had eluded previous scrutiny, and in doing so, I felt a quiet sense of vindication for the meticulous work and patient strategy that had enabled this outcome. Yet the process was not simply about punishment. It was about restoring integrity, illuminating the structures of power that had allowed deception to flourish, and demonstrating that even the most calculated efforts to conceal wrongdoing could ultimately be exposed through diligence, expertise, and principled action. Throughout this period, I remained conscious of the broader implications of the investigation, recognizing that the lessons extended beyond the Ashford family itself. The case highlighted vulnerabilities in corporate governance, regulatory oversight, and charitable accountability, offering insights into how sophisticated actors could exploit legal and financial systems to obscure the truth. By bringing these issues to light, I hope to contribute to a wider understanding of risk, responsibility, and the necessity of vigilance in both public and private sectors, underscoring the idea that accountability is achievable when expertise, courage, and persistence are applied in pursuit of justice. In the end, the federal investigation, arrests, and subsequent legal proceedings represented the culmination of months of careful observation, strategic engagement, and methodical documentation. And while the process had demanded patience, resilience, and unwavering focus, it had also reaffirmed my belief in the power of knowledge and reasoned action. The evidence I gathered, once hidden behind layers of financial engineering and deliberate obfuscation, had been transformed into an instrument of accountability, exposing criminal activity and restoring a measure of justice. I had entered the situation as an observer and consultant, navigating a landscape of manipulation and subtle control, and emerged as a catalyst for transparency, demonstrating that with expertise, strategic thinking, and dedication, Even the most elaborate deceptions can be unraveled and brought to light, ensuring that truth prevails and those responsible face the consequences of their actions. As the dust settled after the whirlwind of revelations, arrests, and federal investigations, I found myself reflecting not only on the magnitude of what had occurred, but also on the deeply personal journey it had entailed. The Ashford family empire, with its glittering facade and intricate financial labyrinths, had seemed untouchable at first, a fortress of wealth and influence that no outsider could penetrate. Yet, through careful observation, strategic thinking, and unwavering dedication to truth, I had succeeded in unraveling the intricate schemes that had threatened to undermine not just the law, but the very principles of fairness and accountability that I had long held dear. The experience had been more than a professional challenge. It had tested my patience, resilience, and intellect in ways I could never have anticipated, pushing me to draw upon every ounce of knowledge, skill, and inner strength I possessed. Throughout the ordeal, my family had been caught in the crossfire. The wedding incident, the public humiliation, and the subsequent exposure of the Ashford family's misdeeds had placed strains on relationships, revealing tensions I had not fully recognized until they were magnified by circumstance. There were moments of doubt, quiet frustration, and even fear, as the stakes grew higher and the implications of my discoveries became more tangible. Yet, in navigating these challenges, I also witnessed the extraordinary power of perseverance and principled action. I learned that integrity is not merely an abstract ideal but a practical tool, one that can guide decisions, protect the innocent, and ultimately restore balance in situations where deceit and manipulation seem to dominate. By remaining calm, methodical, and committed to the truth, I was able to maintain control over circumstances that initially appeared overwhelming, turning obstacles into opportunities to reveal justice. The path was far from easy. Each step forward required meticulous planning, careful verification of facts, and an unwavering commitment to ethical standards. I could not allow anger, resentment, or a desire for revenge to cloud my judgment, as doing so would have jeopardized not only the investigation, but also the integrity of the results. Instead, I drew upon my experience as a forensic accountant and strategist, applying every tool at my disposal to uncover, document, and report wrongdoing. Every ledger entry I analyzed, every email I traced, and every subtle financial irregularity I scrutinized became a testament to the power of knowledge when wielded with diligence and care. With patience and precision, I transformed the chaos and frustration of the initial incident into a methodical, impactful pursuit of truth. The consequences of my efforts were profound. The federal investigation led to arrests and accountability for individuals who had previously relied on wealth and influence to evade scrutiny. Complex schemes of money laundering, fraudulent charities, and manipulative financial structures were brought to light, exposing the hidden machinery behind a facade of affluence and respectability. Yet the most meaningful victory extended beyond the legal outcomes. It lay in the affirmation that intelligence, patience, and moral fortitude can triumph even against the most formidable adversaries. It was a lesson not only for myself but for everyone who had been affected by the Ashford family's actions, proving that courage combined with strategy can yield tangible justice, even when faced with overwhelming power. On a personal level, the experience reshaped my understanding of family, trust, and resilience. I came to appreciate the importance of maintaining clarity of thought and emotional equilibrium, especially when navigating complex interpersonal dynamics. I learned that standing firm in one's principles may provoke discomfort or opposition, but it ultimately strengthens relationships by revealing who can be trusted and who values integrity over convenience. The ordeal reinforced my conviction that challenges, however daunting, are opportunities for growth and transformation, teaching lessons that cannot be learned through comfort or ease. Through this journey, I discovered a renewed sense of confidence in my own abilities, a deeper appreciation for ethical decision-making, and an unshakable belief in the necessity of pursuing truth, no matter the obstacles. As I share this story with you, I want to emphasize the lessons that extend far beyond any single incident. Life will inevitably present moments of conflict, betrayal, or public humiliation, and while the pain of such experiences can feel overwhelming, they also provide opportunities to demonstrate resilience, strategic thinking, and moral courage by approaching challenges with patience, intelligence, and integrity. We not only protect ourselves, but also create a framework for justice that can endure long after the immediate crisis has passed. The journey I undertook was not simply about uncovering financial wrongdoing or responding to personal affronts. It was about affirming the enduring power of ethical action, the importance of reasoned strategy, and the transformative potential of steadfast courage. Thank you for listening to my story and joining me as I navigated one of the most challenging periods of my life. If you found this account insightful or inspiring, I encourage you to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience, strategy, and the triumph of truth. By engaging with this content, you are not only supporting my work, but also becoming part of a community that values patience, intelligence, and integrity in facing life's most formidable challenges. Remember, no matter how powerful the opposition or how complex the obstacles, steadfast commitment to truth and ethical action can lead to extraordinary outcomes. And the lessons learned along the way can empower us all to navigate our own paths with confidence and grace.